Folks, we have a lot to unpack following a week that came with league-shaking injuries, surprise breakouts, and more. I'm not here to waste any of your time, so let's dive into how the running backs stack up for week 2 with plenty of research backing up each pick. We begin with Christian McCaffrey against the Los Angeles Rams. This pick is pretty simple to me. CMC is someone who has hovered around 20 touches per game his entire career, and he logged 25 in the season opener with San Francisco, the highest amount in the league. 6.9 yards per carry against the Steelers' front seven is very impressive. Let's not let that be overshadowed. And I do expect the 49ers to drive a handful of opponents into the ground to the point where they run the ball a ton in the second half, like we saw them do against Pittsburgh. It was 30-7. He's behind a top-notch offensive line, and he averaged 4.9 yards after contact per attempt. That is extremely impressive. He also takes on a Rams defense this week that allowed 4.7 yards per carry in week 1 to the Seahawks. No argument here at all. CMC should be your consensus number 1. Next is Saquon Barkley against Arizona. More times than not, I'm actually having Austin Ekeler in the number 2 spot rather easily, but he did exit the opener against the Miami Dolphins in week 1 with an ankle injury. Saquon was obviously in a horrible spot on Sunday night when the Cowboys obliterated the Giants 40-0, taking him out of the game plan rather quickly. Barkley and this New York offense should be in a much better spot this week against Arizona. The Giants are favored by 5.5 points in that matchup, and the Cardinals are, of course, still without Kyler Murray. I think this goes a lot more to plan for this Giants team. Now here's Austin Ekeler, who before he got hurt was tearing it up per usual. 164 all-purpose yards against the Dolphins. The man averaged 7.3 yards per carry. He's a stud. Let's not act like he should ever be out of this top tier unless we are encountering some extreme circumstances. Look, anytime you have a running back who is healthy and has managed to get 90 targets in a season, more times than not, dating back to the 2019 year, we're all over him, especially in this new offense under Kellen Moore. He does have a tough matchup against the Tennessee team this week that allowed just 69 yards on the ground in week 1, but Los Angeles is favored by 3 points and should be able to get out ahead of Tennessee's offense while getting Ekeler involved in some way, shape, or form as they usually do. We kick off the 8s here with Bijan Robinson against the Green Bay Packers. I feel like we just got a sample of Bijan Robinson and what he can truly be in 2023. He, just like Jahmyr Gibbs and most rookie running backs in their first couple of games, didn't get the most action in the backfield. Tyler Algier had 18 touches to Robinson's 16, and yet still, the man went out and gave us 20.3 points in a standard PPR format. He caught all 6 targets heading in his direction. He was efficient on the ground and got the Falcons in the end zone. I'm feeling awesome about this matchup against the Green Bay Packers, considering that the Packers are a team that gave 4.2 yards per carry to Chicago, despite the fact that offense looked all out of sorts with lineman problems. Chicago still was able to get the run game going. His Texas teammate in Roschon Johnson had a decent day against the Packers on the receiving end. If Bijan Robinson gets a larger sample size, which I feel like it's only a matter of time before we see him get such, you can sit back and enjoy because this man is a spectacle. Tony Pollard was a running back 5 in week 1 despite playing in well short of an entire game due to the fact that Dallas's defense blew the doors off the place before the contest even started. Pollard is super exciting to watch, and with 5 yards per carry, a pair of touchdowns, and some slight involvement in the pass-catching game in a blowout over the Giants, I am excited to watch him play a whole year as the lead back in Dallas. I think Pollard can have a week or two where he's the running back 1 overall. I really do, just because he is so involved in all aspects of the game and is so productive on the ground. But the matchup this week is against a New York Jets defense that did all of the work to grind out a win against the Buffalo Bills without Aaron Rodgers on Monday. We talked about Aaron Jones in the 6 players rising up my fantasy rankings video. Make sure you check that out for sure. But Aaron Jones just made lemonade out of some horrible lemons. He had just 11 touches, yet he was running back 1 overall. Are you kidding me? He caught 2 passes for 86 total yards and scored a touchdown through the air and on the ground. Plus, he left the game early with a pulled hamstring. And I should say this, I'm ranking him at number 6 this week based on the assumption that there are no limitations following that hamstring tweak. I expect Jordan Love to lean more on his running backs in tougher matchups, since he is essentially brand new, and Jones is one of the most seasoned veterans on this Packers offense. It's hard to rule out Nick Chubb, ever. These divisional matchups aren't my favorite, but Christian McCaffrey did just run all over this Pittsburgh Steelers team, and with me making that divisional matchups comment, look, I'm fully aware that Nick Chubb shredded the Bengals last week with 18 rushes for 105 yards. Nick Chubb is automatic. He has averaged at least 5 yards per carry in every season since he debuted in 2018. That is extremely rare. I was also wondering what the pass catching upside would be like with Kareem Hunt gone, and 4 receptions on 4 targets for 21 yards is not a poor start by any means. Onto the beats here, we'll start off with Travis Etienne against Kansas City. This one could potentially be really fun. Travis Etienne was efficient and involved in the first week against an AFC South rival in the Colts. He touched the ball on 34% of the plays, which is very promising from a usage perspective. And now he's playing against an Indianapolis team in a matchup where the over-under for total points scored is hovering around 51. Derrick Henry has a phenomenal matchup, but I've got him at this spot because this is a standard PPR list. Derrick Henry did have 2 catches for 56 yards and broke free on one of those receptions, but his emphasis has always been on the ground as a 4-down bruiser. I've mentioned this before, but we do have to consider that we are dealing with someone who's about to be a 30-year-old running back in the month of January. And Derrick Henry hasn't been paired with a complimentary back throughout his career. He just missed the trend on that. I mean, this is somebody with 300-plus carries in 3 of 4 years from 2019 to 2022. Obviously, he is facing a Chargers defense that struggled mightily against the run last year, giving up a league-high 5.4 yards per carry. So we're keeping all of that into consideration when we rank him here. Josh Jacobs played in an ugly contest between the Raiders and Broncos in Week 1, where Las Vegas edged out a 17-16 win. Jacobs obviously exploded last year behind the high-flying offense, but Week 1 belonged to Jakobi Meyers. Meyers may miss some time after taking a scary hit, but Jacobs will need to be more efficient than 2.5 yards per carry to get an upgrade on this list. The matchup against a tough Buffalo defense is another reason I'm keeping him down here, but Breece Hall showed that it's possible to tear off a deep run or 2 against this Bills defense. Let's go to the C tier and begin with Ramondre Stevenson against Miami. The stars didn't exactly align for Stevenson in Week 1. He was sick. He was playing against a tough defense in the Eagles, and his performance wasn't pretty, to be frank. 2.1 yards per carry is nothing to celebrate, but he found a way to impact the game on the receiving end following his first full year in the league. He caught all 6 targets thrown his way for 64 yards, and that's something the Patriots really leaned into last season, as he had 88 targets while taking the starting role away from Damian Harris, who has since left. The Patriots do play a Dolphins team that has plenty of holes on defense, and New England themselves put together a fine offensive effort against Philly, so I expect another high-scoring matchup here. I've got James Cook next. He didn't have the best game overall against New York, albeit the Jets defense put on, in my opinion, one of the best performances we have seen in a while, considering that the offense completely had to flip their playbook upside down when Aaron Rodgers went down. I'm still a pretty firm believer when we look at the usage situation, though. Cook had 12 of the 22 rushes, with Latavius Murray having 2 and Damian Harris with just 1. Josh Allen, of course, is going to get his when it comes to the running game. This is a quarterback who has called his own number and ran it at least 100 times in each of the last 4 seasons. And the pass-catching involvement when Josh Allen was under pressure was relieving to see. We saw some screens, and Josh Allen immediately looking at James Cook in the flat. I've got to stay honest, after not the best performance, seeing that he only had 63 total yards, but the Bills are showing that they plan to push the ball in Cook's direction often. Breece Hall's first 2 rushes of the season were 83 and 35 yards. The guy had only 11 touches on the day, but he averaged 13.4 yards per touch and looked all types of productive out there for an offense that was squandering for answers. I understand he's supposed to have a reduced role and be eased into the offense following the ACL injury, but I just see the Jets leaning on their strength and running the ball a lot more unless they sign another quarterback or Zach Wilson looks vastly different in the near future. Even with all of that said, Breece Hall is facing a Dallas defense that just pitched a shutout and was looking strong on all fronts in Week 1. We'll see what happens. Onto the D tier, Joe Mixon against Baltimore. Joe Mixon somehow managed to break 10 points in a standard PPR format, even with the Bengals offense having no answers against Cleveland last week. He looked efficient, but his main strength has been in volume. Cincinnati finds a way to incorporate him into this offense in bunches. Mixon has broken 250 touches on 4 occasions in his career and set a career high in targets with 75 of them last season. The Bengals draw a matchup against a Ravens team that allowed just 72 rushing yards in Week 1, so we'll have to see if Mixon can get enough touches or get into the end zone to offset what could be a tough day at the office. Jahmyr Gibbs is another rookie who, while he showed a ton of promise in Week 1, doesn't have the backfield to himself quite yet. We anticipated a split workload, but a split where David Montgomery got 21 touches and Gibbs had just 9 was off-putting to a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs owners, considering the man was going in the 2nd or 3rd round of drafts. I think this is a situation where we all just need to step back, take a deep breath, and take a glass half full approach. Breece Hall had just 23 touches in his first 2 weeks combined last year. And then the Jets cut him loose, and we saw what happened then. Also, from what we did see with Jahmyr Gibbs, there was explosion. Gibbs ran a 4.36 40-yard dash at the combine and put that speed on full display for the Lions in week 1. 6 yards per carry and 60 total yards on just 9 touches shows the potential for insane upside. It was week 1. The Lions wanted to lean on a seasoned vet in David Montgomery while introducing Gibbs to involvement at the professional level in his first week, and he did just fine. Be patient. He's not getting the full workload right away, and I don't expect him to get it against Seattle this week. Start higher usage backs for the next week or so if you want, but please calm down and look at the bright side here. Kenneth Walker III is up next, and there was a rapidly growing narrative that maybe, just maybe, it's going to be Zach Charbonnet's backfield before we know it because Seattle took him in the second round of the draft this year. Well, and again, it's week 1. Walker was in for over 60% of snaps, while Charbonnet was in for 24% with only 3 touches on the day. Despite Seattle's offensive struggles, Walker had 5.3 yards per carry and looked sharp last week. Against this Detroit Lions defense, I expect him to get a similar workload, considering the production we saw, and if it's a closer game, maybe we see the Seahawks get more balanced and run the ball for more than just 18 total times as a team. That would surely help Walker's upside. Out of all the teams that went pass heavy in week 1, the Pittsburgh Steelers took the cake by throwing the ball 84% of the time in a 30-7 loss against the 49ers. I am a firm believer that Jaylen Warren will continue to insert himself into the conversation as this season progresses. Najee Harris was in for 52% of snaps. Jaylen Warren was in for 40%. These two are kind of a mutually exclusive duo, meaning they don't complement each other like other backfield duos because their games are exactly the same. Both guys run a handful of routes, catch a few passes here and there, and play as all involvement backs. Miles Sanders sneakily had a significant enough role against the Falcons in week 1 for me to put him in this D tier. Not only do I like the fact he had 18 touches on the ground and was available in 57% of snaps, but I love the situation he's in going forward. It's a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, and in those systems, we typically see the offense lean a little more on the run game before letting that rookie QB loose. Look, Bryce Young is insanely talented. He's the number 1 overall pick, but Carolina is obviously in a situation where they're building from the ground up. The upside with 6 targets for Sanders is also promising, as it doesn't hurt to have a pass-catching back around a young QB. That's the same reason I'm high on Aaron Jones alongside Jordan Love. Onto the E tier, David Montgomery versus Seattle. David Montgomery is going to play a prominent part in this offense. I truly do believe that. He wasn't exactly efficient in week 1, logging 21 carries for 74 yards, but he got volume, and the key? He got into the end zone. Montgomery is more than 20 pounds heavier than Jahmyr Gibbs. He obviously has the experience after riding his rookie contract out with the Chicago Bears until last year, and I expect the majority of red zone, goal to go, and crunch time situations where the team needs to muscle their way across the line for a yard or two to be on the shoulders of David Montgomery. He doesn't have the easiest matchup this week. He's facing a Seattle team allowing less than 3 yards per carry in week 1. But as we said with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift last year, Detroit finds a way to get multiple backs heavily involved. Speaking of Jamal Williams, he's up next as he enters week 2 of his 3-game stint as the starter for the Saints with Alvin Kamara out. Williams was not efficient in his Saints debut and could definitely fall into that touchdown-reliant profile after scoring 17 times on the ground with minimal receiving involvement last year with the Lions. But now he matches up against a Panthers team that allowed 5 yards per carry and allowed both Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier to run rampant. Because of the optimal matchup, he comfortably makes the rankings list in week 2. Rachaad White is up next, and he comes off an ugly outing against the Vikings. Despite being in for 79% of snaps, White finished at the running back 40 spot, while averaging less than 2.3 yards per carry. I don't want to entirely blame Rachaad White because in 17 rushes, he had just 19 total yards before contact, which is horrible and a strong indicator of a weak offensive line. With that being said, he has a matchup against the Bears this week where the Bucs are favored, and if the game pans out, how it likely will against a struggling and rebuilding Chicago team, White should eat up some touches as the minutes dial down later in the game. We roll with Alexander Mattison next. He gets a promotion to the starting RB spot with Dalvin Cook gone, but let's not fool ourselves. This Minnesota team loves to pass. They threw the ball 72% of the time, the second highest mark of any team in week 1, so Mattison has to be involved in that aspect to have any chance at being a worthy fantasy running back. He now has to face an Eagles team that is one of the toughest defenses in the league through and through. And it's not like Mattison has breakaway speed. He ran a 4.67 40-yard dash at the combine. He's going to be that tough runner, more of a bruiser, if you will. And onto the F tier. This tier still has reasonable running back options. It's just the last 3 selections of a top 25 list for the week, And we begin with Raheem Mostert against the Patriots. Mostert had a decent week 1 performance against the Chargers that was bolstered into a double-digit performance thanks to a touchdown. The way I see it is this. Overall, Raheem Mostert is a phenomenal sell right now if you have him. He's a 5.3 yards per carry rusher in his career in a high-flying offense currently in Miami, presenting upside, but I personally wouldn't want to hold on to a 31-year-old running back who has played a full season just twice in his career that has been riddled with injuries. He also has to face a stingy Patriots defense here in week 2, but Miami is a 3-point favorite, so maybe he gets decent usage down the stretch. We are slotting Tyler Algier into this list ahead of his date with the Packers after an impressive performance where he beat out Bijan Robinson 18-16 in touches. While drafting someone who could be a generational talent can and will limit Algier's upside, he still looked electric and got a pair of touchdowns after having just 3 scores all year last year. This is a team that ran the ball more often than every squad not named the Chicago Bears in 2022, so I think there's room for both backs to be impactful. Kenneth Gainwell rounds this thing out after taking over the RB1 spot, at least for now, in Philadelphia. Look, we read the reports that he was getting first-team reps in training camp. Rashad Penny was scratched from week 1, and DeAndre Swift and Boston Scott had 3 rushes combined. It's a shared workload for sure, especially when considering that Jalen Hurts runs the ball 8 times per game on average in his career. But behind one of the best offensive lines and most run-heavy schemes in the NFL in Philly over the last year plus, I like what Kenneth Gainwell's got going on. Look, it is a tough matchup against Indianapolis's front 7, a unit that allowed just 3 yards per carry last week, but I like the volume situation for Gainwell. Thank you for watching as always. Let me know if I missed anybody among the rankings in the comments section below. Like and subscribe if I helped you with your fantasy football team heading into week 2, and we will see you in the next video.